want to start by giving a warm welcome to Ozzie Monge. And now in our class, in this class, we're going to be having a borderland speaker series. So we're going to have speakers about who do work, whether it be research, practice, activism, organizing at the border and along the borderlands. And that's going to be our borderland speaker series that we're going to have. And we inaugurate our speaker series with Ozzie Monge, who identifies as an undocumented love child of the Sonoran Desert, of the O'odham and Opata Native Nation, and maybe more. He's also the educator, scholar, and organizer dedicated to advancing the success of Native students in post-secondary and higher education. And his work, research, practice, and teaching is extensive and has had a significant influence in our SDSU campus in the service and really social justice of our Native students. I had the pleasure of meeting Ozzie back a few years ago. I think it was about 7 years ago, as he was serving as the advisor for the Native American Student Alliance organization at San Diego State University. He's also an instructor in CSU San Marcos. He's a lecturer in American Indian Studies. He's also been an instructor in the Kumeyaay Community College. And most recently, he started his doctoral studies in a joint PhD program in education at San Diego State and Claremont Graduate University, where I got my PhD in education as well. So with no further ado, I pass on the mic to Ozzie.
Yeah, turn my picture on. Oh, look, I'm all pink.
And would you like to share your screen?
Yeah, go. That's me right behind there. Okay. Hey, that's me.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. I can't see everybody though.
This is what I'll say. For our class, once we open up for Q&A, what we can do is we can walk to the front. That way the camera can see you and the questions. So I highly encourage you to take notes of the questions you want to ask, because one way to engage in the Q&A would be that way. So kind of being versatile, just because the camera isn't showing the class and Ozzie won't be able to see you. So I welcome you to write down or type down your questions. But for now, Ozzie, I hope this is okay. I know you can see me and my class can see you.
No, poor things. Yeah, did you mention I killed the mascot?
Well, no, I haven't. You are more than welcome to. I mean, one of the things that we want is definitely to be critical. And the critical dialogue and discussion is welcome, and even
yeah, we can talk about that later. So I've never done a PowerPoint through the shared thing, so that's why I said it to you in case I screw this up really badly. But I didn't realize this was an in-person class, so I thought I was going to see all the little the usual Zoom little windows. So hi everybody, thanks for coming to school so late. If you hear some weird noises, it's my dog trying to get me to play. He's sitting right there laying down. So let's see if I can get this thing to work.
Yeah, and I'll help you.
So I turned on my presentation and now I do share screen somehow, right? Which I don't know.
Yeah, so you see the green at the bottom, you see the chat,
Yeah.
and then you see a share screen that is green. If you click on it.
Uh-oh.
That's okay. We'll make it work.
Is that yours, not or me? No, that's me.
Okay, up on the screen.
Where's the share screen thing?
Okay, so if you hover down, you'll see like the chat box. You see the chat box?
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so double click there on the share screen.
Yeah. Is it working?
Not yet. Let's see.
No. Technology. Well, we might have to do it the other way.
Okay, then let me help you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. One moment.
Thanks for your patience.
No, you're fine. Yeah.
Oh, this says share here. Okay, I think I got it now. Did it work?
Yeah.
My screen.
Awesome.
Bam. Now?
Yes. And we see your first screen.
Ha ha ha! I did it. All right. Thanks. Hey, I'll get that PhD in freaking Zoom, right? All right. So thank you for the introduction. Very kind of you. Here's a boundary marker. You know, clearly if you've seen these before, but I think we only got like what 15 minutes. Is that about it?
Yes, I mean, you are welcome to, our class actually goes until, we usually stay until 9:30, and you're welcome to share as much as you like, so.
I'd rather talk to them too, so I'll go through this, you know, as quickly as I can. Plus, we got a poem to read at the end too, so it's really nice. So thank you. So I just got to point out that, you know, here you go, this is me again, right? I'm a descendant. This is part of the issues that I'll bring up that comes with the border. I'm not an enrolled member of the Tanata Nation, and that you know, I am indigenous clearly, and as I like to joke, I'm part Native, part European too, but I can't prove it. But not being enrolled, you know, it sort of is a separation from my culture, my peoples, that took place a few generations ago, and I'll get to why that's the case. So this is me at the Tanata Cultural Center. It's outside of Cells. And that peak back there is a holy peak to the O'odham people. So O'odham people are not just O'odham. O'odham means desert people. There are also O'odham who are to the north. They used to be known as Pimas. Maybe you've heard of Pimas. The O'odham were once referred to also as Papagos. They still are in Mexico referred to as Pima and Papagos. And as peoples, we were spread, you know, up and down the desert. There weren't any borders. There was these sort of understood boundaries where people would travel back and forth and traverse. Let's see what's next. So that's another image of that mountain, that sacred site. So to the O'odham people, this is like the center of the universe, or of the world, and it's also the home of the creator Itoy, who is also known as elder brother. But he gifted the people with, you know, a way of living, a way of being called Himdog that teaches us, you know, to live in balance with the earth and with each other, you know, to interact with each other in a good way. Of course, this is the seal that it features, that peak there. And you guys have seen this image before, right? The man in the maze. So this is probably the most well-known symbol that the O'odham people have, that people are familiar with. So we're, of course, like I said, I'm a love child of the Sonoran Desert. What that means is that all my ancestors, you know, some of them are from there, they're indigenous, my O'odham and Opata ancestors, but other people came from Europe. My last name is French, for example. And I also have family that you know, originated in Spain, but became Mexicans. So all those people, you know, wandering around that desert created me. And the funny thing is that at one point, at some point in time in history, they were trying to kill each other. And that's funny, over the land, right? And the image to the right is the boundaries of the national park, the national monument, known as the Sonoran Desert National Monument. If you ever want to go out there, it's hot, right? But you're out there. Was it really hot today?
Yeah.
Because it was like 102 in San Marcos, so it must have been heck out. Was really hot, huh?
What was the highest today?
I didn't even know. I think all the thermometers are crying too hard to tell me. But you see, you guys, so you know where Gila Bend is, right? So you're closer, the 8th right there. So you probably know where this monument is already. See what's the next slide. Oh, so everything was cool, you know, until this dude shows up. And messes everything up. Colonialism, settler colonialism in this case. You know, first he came over for the gold, and first, you know, of course, in the Caribbean, and then that leads to occupation of Cuba, and then, of course, then Mexico. And then they begin a program of settler colonialism, which is that they've come not to just take the wealth, but to extract labor from the people as well, put them to work and to live there. So there's a whole other topic about the claiming of the land. A lot of it is rooted in Catholicism. The Pope said through a papal bull that Europeans, first it was Portugal, can go forward and seize the bodies, the property, and the land of Saracens and pagans and heathens because they were Christian. And that laid the foundation for what would become the Atlantic slave trade and, of course, the invasion of what we now call the Americas. So this is a map. It says 1650. You can tell it's dated also because you see down there where Arizona is, it says Papago, right? That's the old word for O'odham people, and Pima. And then where you are, you see that there's Digueño, and of course you're familiar with the Cocopa, the Maricopa, the Yuma. Those are all the human language speaking peoples. So the Sonoran Desert, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving around or not,
Yes.
but it's this is basically it right here. So you've got O'odham, Opata. There's also people known as Pimadapo, who are also related to the Seri, the Yaqui. Now notice this is where the Yaqui were originally, right? But now the Yaqui have reservation here and here because they were fleeing from Mexico. And I'll get to that in a moment too. And of course, our cousins, the Chiricahua Apache, the Inde, Mescaleros, and all these other people here too. Huicholes. Do you see any Aztecs around here? No, no Aztecs. We'll get to that in a minute too. So this is, I like this map because there's no saguaros in California. But the saguaro is like the big symbol of the desert. And this is the traditional land of the Tanat Nation. And this is what the reservation is today. And this is actually, they're better off than most other peoples. They have the second largest reservation among the native peoples that are federally recognized. And up here, actually more up here towards the Four Corners are the Diné, the Navajo. Theirs is the largest, and it covers the area of 4 states. Are you familiar with the distinction between what a federally recognized Indian is versus a non-federally recognized? I am not enrolled, so I am not recognized. The people from whom I've derived are. But if you have to be a citizen of the nation in order to be, a legal Indian in this country, and that's part of the genocidal program to reduce the amount of natives. This brings up the topic of blood quantum, which is a miracle way to erase natives over generations. And the main reason why they want to do that is to get rid of natives so they have more access to lands. That's the old logic. Nowadays, of course, native peoples we're coming back. We're bouncing back from we're genocide survivors, to put it flatly, and the populations are blossoming again, and people are reaffirming themselves. But there's still a lot of tension between people that are enrolled. Some of them don't want to acknowledge that people like me exist. That we're the descendants of people from their nation too. In fact, I have living family members that are on the res, but they don't talk to me. Right? Sad stories. Now there's a movie attached to this, but I think we'll watch that one at the end. Let me go to the next slide here. So this is another map. This is Opateria, and you notice there's some overlap between the previous map of the territories, and this is not uncommon because people, they tended to intermingle. They're like I said, there weren't any like firm borders. This map is a product of a project that's being done by some people in Sonora in Mexico. They're trying to find people like me who are descended from the Opata Nation, and we're working to reestablish cultures, traditions, languages. That language is almost dead, and it's a result of the Mexican government's position towards natives peoples is it's not very good. It's very assimilative and based on racism. They don't want natives. They haven't wanted natives for a long time. So a lot of the people that are descended from Opatas have been Mexicanized to the point that the language is almost gone. So we're trying to reverse that trend. And again, more old maps of the Pimeria Alta. So this is the Akimel O'odham people. And there again, you see that word Papago, which used to be the word for O'odham, Tonatam people. The Hiased are also O'odham over here on the left. You see that? And down over here on the right-hand map, Pima de Abajo, where it says Lower Pima, those are the O'odham that they're not Don O'odham, right? They're Akmal O'odham, but they're in Mexico. So O'odham people stretched all through that area. And of course, people being people, we intermarried with Opatas and Seri and people from all around that area. You know, you saw somebody when you're walking through the desert that caught your eye, you had a baby if things worked out well. So before we get to the next slide, I want to just bring up something that's important to realize and maybe hard to swallow for some people, but we have to understand that both the United States and Mexico are settler colonial states. And I don't know if you know what I mean by that. And so the thing that drives settler colonialism is the eradication of the indigenous peoples. Now, the US went about it one way and Mexico went about it another way. The US, originally it was just genocide, killing, literal killing of people. Now, there were some genocidal campaigns in Mexico, like the one that drove the Yaqui north across the border into the US. But for the most part, the Spanish and then the Mexican approach towards native peoples was to get them to assimilate into the larger Mexican culture. And one of the tools they used for that was this bizarre romanticized Aztec that we can talk about after this if you want to. But we understand that Mexico has never wanted native peoples to keep surviving. In fact, the view towards native peoples in Mexico is that they're backwards and that they're impediments towards the industrialization, the advancement, and the progress of the state of Mexico. And so the state has always tried to get them to Mexicanize. And this is still a problem that goes on today. Like in the Ejidos over here in Baja, where the Kumeyaay are resisting the encroachment of Mexicans. And this will probably shock you. In this context, the Mexicans are the white people, and they're referred to as blancos, right? And they're coming, to take the land and appropriate culture and all sorts of things. And we could talk about that too after this, if that needs more explaining. So this is what led to the border. On the left is what the New Spain, which then became Mexico, looked like before the war. And of course, everyone likes to look at this map. Chicanos like to point to that area and call it Aztlan. That's not Aztlan. That's that's native land here. No Aztecs there. But at that time, that land was really uncontrolled. Even though they had a claim on it, there was very little control. Native peoples are still living there free. There were very few people when the war started, Mexicans that lived in those areas. They're mostly along the coast, both in California and Texas, with some pueblos and stuff and scattered in the more habitable areas. And of course, on the right is the lands that were ceded after the war, after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And it wasn't just the treaty, right? After the treaty, there were subsequent agreements that were conducted, a secession in 1848. But what's interesting is the Gadsden purchase in 1853. It's that gray area over here. So this was to facilitate the building of railroads, right, from Texas to New Mexico, Arizona to California. So the United States bought this land from Mexico. And it's interesting because the Gadsden purchase is what split the Tonatam Nation. This was the border at this time of the signing of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And after the Gadsden purchase, bam, there's the land that goes right through there. And of course, as they were saying, there was no consultation with the peoples. They just did it, right? So you saw a slide like this already. We didn't cross the border. We're the original ones. We're the OG. We didn't cross the border crossed us peoples, right? And these are all the peoples that have been affected by the border. Oh, how'd that happen? Another one. Am I going backwards? Oh, wait, I did want to go backwards. What, do we have time to watch a quick video?
If we have the option to play video, yes, we do.
Or you know what? I can send you the link and you can watch it later because I'd rather get to talking with the students if they have questions. So the border, I think Doctora Falcon mentioned is violence. The border itself is violence. Violence on the land, violence on the people. Not to mention the violence that led to the creation of it in the first place. The war itself, and then the lines that were drawn, and the way that indigenous peoples were separated. But since then, peoples have always migrated up and down the continent, and this is well documented. We've traded with people, way north and way south. There were no walls. We had our ways of interacting with other peoples from other places, and that was all disrupted when the Europeans arrived. And so there's still natural flows of migration to include people coming, over here to work. And now, because of things like Operation Gatekeeper that you'll be talking about, and of course the physical barriers themselves, there's a lot of dead people out there. They still haven't found all the bodies that are out there, and there's a lot of them on the Tanata Nation itself too. And it's a sad thing to think about. I know that guy's all worried about drugs or whatever, but humans are dying. We could talk about other things that they could do to deal with drugs. It's the demand side needs to be addressed, not just the supply side. So, and who else is subjected to violence at the border? Nature itself. We have. Did you even know there were jaguars? That we had jaguars here in North America? They're rare, and that wall is very disruptive. Just human activity, is disruptive to nature as it is. But these jaguars are, these beautiful animals, and they're near extinction. And then this is a sad story. Poor coyote. His name is. I'm sorry. He's a wolf. Named Mr. Goodbar. Now, this picture on the left, you see those red dots here? This is Mr. Goodbar wandering around. He's looking for love, right? And he hits the wall, and he walks around the wall, he's trying to find a mate, but he can't get past that wall. So he's already having a hard enough time, because what this leads to is, this wolf population here cannot interact and breed with the wolf population there, and it leads to inbreeding, which causes bad things to happen biologically to these poor guys. But not only did this guy have a hard time trying to find a girlfriend, he got shot. This was over in New Mexico. They shot him and they had to amputate his leg. So this is the kind of stuff that the border itself does, not just to people, but to the landscape, to nature itself, and the animals that live there. And the desert has a wide variety of animal life there. Deer, tortoises, all kinds of stuff. And it's all disrupted. The walls are all problematic. And you'll see more than one picture where there's like a dead deer next to the wall because he couldn't get across. And of course, historically, there's been a lot of violence towards Native peoples, both coming from the Anglo-Americans and from the Mexicans hunting us originally sometimes to enslave our children, sometimes just to kill us. And so the sorts of things that we had to do to survive. This poem is special to me. It was written by Deborah Miranda. She's Ohlone, which are coastal people over here in California. But the story she tells in this poem is a very common story. So if you'll indulge me, I'd like to read it to you. But first, pay attention to this article over here. Professora, she has the slide, so she can show it to you later if you want to read it in whole. But this shows you the way that they were hunting native peoples. They were looking here specifically for Apaches, right? But if you had long hair, that's all that mattered. And the language, you know, when you get down to the bottom, they were referring to us as animals and vermin. That's the way they thought about us, and not just the Anglos, but the Mexicans too. And it's a sad thing. But the Anglos were particularly murdersome. But let me read this poem before my voice goes away. So we can have this up here. So, riddle. When is a lie the truth? When is the truth a lie? When a lie saves your life, that's truth. When a lie saves the lives of your children, your grandchildren, and 5 generations forward, that's truth in a form so pure it can't be anything but a story. After the mission broke up, it was better to lie like a dog about blood. Say you're Mexican, 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 Mexican. Put it on birth certificates. Put it on death certificates. Tell it to the census takers. Tell it to the self-appointed bounty hunters who appear at your door looking for Indians, Indians, Indians. And when you tell that lie, tell it in Spanish. Give your children Spanish names. Tranquilino, Maria Ignacia, Dolores, Faustino, lies that deflect genocide. So tell them loudly at the baptismal font in the old mission to the Indian agent collecting bodies for the boarding school in Riverside. Broadcast the names in the street like wheat when you call your Mexican children at dusk for a bite of acorn mush and cactus apple. I'm going to keep reading, but this is my great-great-grandmother, Felicita. She was born in a town called Banamichi in Sonora, which is an Opata village. Grandmothers dress like poor white women. In other words, like a Mexican. Wear their heavy aprons, high-necked muslin dresses, and shoes. Shoes, shoes, shoes. Shame your grandchildren when they run around barefoot. What are you, an Indian? And stand silent, approving, when bigger becomes their favorite slur to hurl at the youngest, the awkward, the slow, the dark. Don't tell them you still speak Chumash with your mother. That's a lie your descendants will hate you for, but lie anyway, so they will be alive to complain. So the little marinero in the middle, that's my grandfather, Roberto. On the right is Petra Molina. That's the daughter of the woman that you saw earlier. And over here on the left side is Agustin Rosales. He's actually from Hermosillo, but his family comes from further south, from San Luis Potosi. That's my family. I kind of look like Petra a bit, huh? She's a little grumpy. Grandfathers, lie about where you're going. When you slip out at night, retrieve your dancing clothes from the hiding place, drive up unlit roads to a rancheria in the hills where clappers and rattles whisper the truth and bare Indian feet beat against the earth. Beat, 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 like children begging to be let back inside. Don't teach old songs to your grandchildren. Don't make the regalia in front of them. Don't dance where young eyes might see. Sing the alarada when the priest can hear. Hum the deer song when they can't. So that's my mom on the right. And that's my abuelita next to her. And it's my tío Bobby, the young man there. And my tía Maria and Graciela. And this picture was taken in Agua Prieta, probably like in 1964 or 5. Drag your feet in the dust, buy a tie for Sundays, tell the lies now and maybe later your descendant will dig for the truth in libraries, field notes, museums, wax cylinders, recordings, newspaper reports of massacres and relocations, clues you left behind when you forgot to lie, 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 lie. And now you know what I look like, that's me. But these are my 2 Weddle kids, Isabella and Adrian. And we're still here, you know. We are still here, and that's it. That's the end of the slides. It's a rough poem, though. Makes me cry sometimes.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and overall just brilliance in the study of Native nations, specifically what it means here in here in our region. I think that's very insightful, but we do want to open up the floor for questions. So I do want to invite you to come up when you ask your question, because sharing is a two-way street. Professor Ozzie was kind enough to share with us his story, as well as his brilliance in scholarship and understanding of Native nations. And also, I would love for him to have the opportunity to see you and get to know you now that we don't have the cameras that flip and they can see the class, to have an alternative, kind of like a alternative to that, we can come up and ask our questions. So we do want to open up the floor to questions, and I also have questions, but before I ask my questions, do any of you have any questions for Professor Ozzie? Does it relate at all to your positionality statement? Did you find any relevance, particularly maybe identity? And no questions is too small, so, but I do want to welcome you. It is part of the participation, but I think also just making it, having the nice experience of being able to exchange, stories.
Maybe I could ask them some questions.
Yeah, I mean, we could, yeah, and I also have some questions as well. But if you don't have questions, we'll open up the floor then for questions for you on the topic. But before we do that, we do want to just give you this opportunity, the space.
Are there people there that know their Native ancestors?
What was the question?
If any of you know of your Native ancestors.
I know that my ancestor came from Spain. We have el escudo de armas.
Do you want to come up with me? And I'll share too. I have a little bit of,
Okay, well,
I know, I mean, I'm shy, pero.
I know a little bit about my ancestors. They came from Spain. We still have, I don't know how to say it in English, nuestro escudo de armas, that represent the family.
The coat of arms.
Yeah, and mostly that's it. It was, well, if we go there, but it was because was like influence on them. And yeah, that's it. And I want to ask, now that I'm here, I want to ask, what do you think about the border being in another space different that where it's now? You think that the things would have been different about the separation between the different tribes in the border?
It's a good question. Like, so Ozzie, just using the imagination, if there wasn't a border, could have they been different?
Yeah.
Oh, well, of course, things were different, but even like, so we saw that picture of Felicita. There was a booth, right? But there was no fence, no wall, no anything. Do you remember the picture of the sailor and the man to the left? That's Agustin. He built a little house in a place called Pernalville, which is near Douglas, Arizona, right across the border from Agua Prieta. And he would walk across the border all the time just to go down Agua Prieta to go dance and smoke and drink, right? So there was a time when the border didn't even matter. And the militarization of it, in fact, the video that I had linked talks about the militarization of the border. You know, the border is all about racism. It's a long, sad history. You've got all these things coming together at this line, the scar across the land. It's this What's the word that Salud said? Herida, right? Is that what she said? Yeah. The scar on the land. And it's a shame, that things had to be the way that they are. There could have been other ways that people from the settlers came here and we could have interacted differently, but didn't turn out that way. Can it ever change in the future? Well, I hope so. I'm one of those people that advocates for the destruction of the border wall. Of course, everyone starts freaking out. What about migration? The state. You go to Europe, there are places where, like, you can sit at a cafe and the border of one country and the other was right to the middle of the cafe, right? Why isn't it a problem there? Well, of course, they have the EU, but it's because there isn't any particular form of racism against the people on the other side of the border, right? Like there is here in the United States. So there was a time it was better, and hopefully in the future there's a time where it can be better again.
And another question, yeah, about the socio-economical status of the tribe. Do you think that the racism and the borders had like a very big influence on the socio-economical status?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, the Town O'odham Nation is unique in that they actually, they were saying, as they mentioned, they give citizenship to the people that are in Mexico, right? So they have cards that say they belong to the Town O'odham Nation. Now, I might get in trouble. Are they Kumeyaay in the audience? Because I'm going to get in trouble here. Now,
in the audience.
on this side of the border, we have federally recognized tribes, and federal Indian law has provided for certain tribes to be able to set up casinos. In fact, they all can set up casinos if they wanted to, but some, are not as successful as others. So, for example, you got Barona, Sequana, Viejas, outside of San Diego, that are generating a lot of money, right? And they're cousins. They're literal blood cousins across the border are broke. They're poor, right? Now I can't critique, why the Kumeyaay aren't sending some money over to help, but the disparity between the rights and privileges that they have in the United States now, at this date and time, versus, what's going on in the Hijilos in Baja, it's just night and day. They still live, in humble homes. They're proud people. They're not ashamed, but they don't have, big swimming pools and condominium or big townhomes like they do up here. So there is a big disparity that border caused. You can't say that the border itself did it, but it's an outcome of the border, right? That disparity exists.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? We do want to open up the floor for questions, invite you to ask questions. Or we'll open up questions for you as well, if you provide us and invite us with the opportunity. But before doing that, I want to give you the space and the opportunity to ask questions. Does anybody have any other questions for Professor Ozzie? And I think you were raising your hand, or no?
I was like on the fence about it.
Yeah.
It was about like the connecting to like our ancestry.
Yeah,
'Cause,
and I want to reflect on that as well. Do you want to come up and ask?
I'll go for it.
Yeah, don't be shy of the big giant head on the wall. I got a big head in real life too. Chicharito.
Oh yeah, I know. So pretty much my great grandfather, his mom was a member of the Kumeyaay Nation, and like out of fear, him and his brothers and sisters got taken to Mexicali, and they kind of lost the ancestry. So I wanted to like reconnect with it. Was there anything that like sparked you to reconnect with your roots?
Yeah, it's a funny story actually. So, like a lot of people, the word in Mexico is mestizo. So those of us that are of mixed ancestry, right? Although I'm not a big fan of that word because it comes from, I prefer just to say mixed ancestry, having ancestors from different cultures, because of the official state mestizaje. That's another long story. But back when, I didn't know any better, I was a defense contractor And I would fly around the country a lot. And one time, I'm doing a stopover in Phoenix on my way to Baltimore, and this elder comes on the plane, and he sits next to me. This is true story. He sits next to me and he goes like this, you know, and I go like that because that's international. I'm from LA, right? I know what that means. So he says to me, "Where are you from?" And I go, "Oh, I'm from LA." And he goes, "No, no, no. Where are you from?" And I'm from LA, you know, Huntington Park. I was born there, you know. He says, "No, where are you from?" Right? I don't know, from LA. And he straight up hits me. He boom, going on the arm really hard. He says, "You don't know where you're from. I see you. You're a native man, and you don't know where you're from. You better go talk to your mom. You better go talk to your grandmother. You need to learn where you're from." Right? I said, "I'm from LA." And he hit me again. So I had to sit next to this man for like 4 hours as we were flying back. He's getting beat up on the plane, right? And I'm from LA. And he was the one that sparked the question in my mind. Because sadly, you know, my mother was raised to think about natives in a racist way. Her grandmother would say, like when the kids would come in and they were dirty, "Ay, you know, mire como parecen como apaches," right? Because they were dirty and smelly. So my mother grew up with that Mexican racism. My mother wasn't, you know, she wasn't mean in any way. She didn't have a mean heart, but cultures, you know, they adapt attitudes and perceptions that lead to these casual forms of racism. So when I approached her, she, you know, I said, "Mom, you know, are we native?" She says, "No, mijo, no, we're Mexican, right?" And I wasn't satisfied with that answer because I didn't want to get beat up on the plane again. So I began researching, I began digging, and it's been a long process, And the biggest thing was finding Petra Molina's birth certificate at Casablanca, which is right on the reservation, right? Right on the reservation. And I was like, holy moly, you know, we're Indians, right? Now the hard part is because of enrollment and the laws and stuff, on this side of the border, you know, it's because of federal recognition, to be an Indian and to be enrolled, every nation has its own different rules. Over in Mexico, you know, there are no sorts of reservations. There are ejidos, you know, these communities that are organized, but they don't have the same kind of rights that, you know, they do over here in the U.S. So doing that research is still particularly hard. That picture of me when I was there at the cultural center was me there doing research into my ancestry. So yeah, it's a lot of work. It ain't easy, but that's what sparked it, was a guy beating me up in an airplane.
Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing. And I, you know, reflecting on what you shared and what Professor Ozzie shared, you know, it's that like internal racism that is also perpetuated, as we saw in the poem, right? Where you're trying to kind of save your life, so save your livelihood, but as the time goes by, it's an internal racism. In my family, so my mom's Mexican, my dad's Peruvian, and my great grandmother, she spoke Quechua. But you know, she has so many good qualities. But one of the things is that she wanted to be white, and never did we ever learn anything about like indigenous history or any of that. But what I do know is that she spoke Quechua. So what, you know, what does that mean? What does that, you know, where does that mean about my family history? I don't, there was also that, a lot of that, the colorism and the no estén afuera tanto en el sol, que porque, you know, all of that. And it came a lot from her, but I'll have to ask, but unfortunately it kind of died there, and it died with her. And But I think Professor Ozzie invites us to look critically not only at the readings, but also in of our history and what you share as well as important. Thank you.
There's this saying, I can't remember who said it exactly, but he said, every mestizo is either a dead Indian or an Indian who needed to come back to life.
We're almost out of time, but I do want to open up the floor to a last question. Does anybody have a question that you wanted to ask that maybe you haven't had opportunity to? This is definitely the space, the time to ask questions. No, there's no question too big or too small. It's definitely the opportunity to learn and also to share as well. So this is a chance to ask one last question before we end.
It's naturally black.
Ozzie, did you want to ask the class a concluding question?
They want to go home. It's late, huh?
Yes, this is a late class. Well, if we don't have any questions, what I do want to do is just thank you, Ozzie, once again. And I do want to just give the floor if you have any last thoughts or insights that you want to share, the mic is yours.
Oh, no, you don't want me to tell them about the Aztec at SDSU, do you? Well, no, remember about how I mentioned Mexican nationalism, right? And the Mestizaje stuff. The Aztec of Mexican nationalism isn't imagined or created by the Criollo settlers. It's a romanticized Indian, but it's used as a lever to put native peoples in the past, right? And especially in the 1920s, during a program called Indigenismo, they really played up, the celebration of indigenous stuff, like, through artists like Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera. And there's all these beautiful paintings in the National Palace, but the idea was to put the natives in the past. And the appeal was to the remaining native peoples to abandon being native, right? And become Mexicans. And if you ever read a book called La Raza Cósmica, it actually says to procreate with Europeans in order to make better children than an indigenous or a black or an Asian child. So Mexican racism is very insidious, and it's bizarre that the role played this Aztec played in that whole program. So when you look to San Diego State and its Aztec and its origins, what you have there embodied are the worst of U.S. and Mexican racism. People playing, dressing up like Indians, if you look at the images from the past. So I guess the bottom line is what I'm trying to say is be critical, not just of, societies and the things around you, but the places that are educating you as well. Pay attention to subtle things like Aztecs or the campus architecture, which I refer to as a life-size 4th grade mission project, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with the whole purpose of the mission project, but it wasn't good. And when you put those two things together, the fake Aztec, right, and the mission architecture, the closest corollary to that would be if a campus was themed off of a southern cotton plantation and the mascot was a black slave, right? Or if the campus were themed off, and this is a bad case too, a Nazi death camp, Auschwitz, and the mascot was a Jew. Those histories, you have to know them. And those histories have been whitewashed through places like San Diego State. And San Diego State is still engaged in a whitewashing of its racial history with this Aztec cultural education stuff. I mean, if they really wanted to educate people about Aztecs, the first thing they would teach them is that that's not the right word for those people. They're a Mexica. They were no longer Aztecs. After Huitzilopochtli told them to leave Aztlan, they stopped being Aztecs. So pay attention, be critical, right? Don't take everything for granted, and keep an eye on. Take trucha, right? How's that?
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, your brilliance, your story. And one last round of applause.